saying that the face-to-face aspect of it, because like ultimately like we're relational animals or relational beings, and so it's one thing to go through a soup kitchen line and pick stuff up without having the actual interaction with the person, which sometimes happens, but being able to sit down and get to know somebody, get to hear their story, have them feel known and heard, it's actually probably more important because it gives them value, or it like reestablishes the fact that they're worth what they say that they're not. You know, I did a homeless ministry with my wife for several years until we had our kids, and we would do that every Monday night. Good to go. So, you know, today on Patriot on Purpose, we have Paul Hutchinson. If you go to his website, you're going to see a long list of really cool things this guy's done. I can't remember any of them, so I'm just going to introduce him as one of the executive producers on The Sound of Freedom, which is a movie that has obviously taken the world by storm in the past year. Incredibly impactful for myself as well as Nate here, and as well as hundreds, if not millions upon, or I would say millions upon millions upon millions of Americans. So we're happy to have him on here to continue to shed light on the issue of human trafficking and just kind of talk about what's going on, and, you know, not so much the negative side of things, but probably more so the positive side of things, and like where the direction we have available to conquering this problem once and for all. But before we go too far, one of the first things that we do on this podcast is we just ask you what you think a patriot is, because I think that word has a bad name, or there's a connotation around patriotism that has kind of changed over the past decade, and so we just want to know what it means to you.
What is a patriot? I believe that the name, the word patriot, comes with loyalty to what is right, what is good, to our roots of what made us a great nation. And that's what a patriot is to me. You know, it's somebody who would stand up and fight for what is right. Somebody who doesn't just look the other way when injustices are happening, but is willing to put their own lives in danger to ensure the freedom of others. That's what a patriot is.
I like that.
I love that.
I like it too, because it's like, it's not just tied directly to American patriotism, which is obviously the lens at which most of us are looking through it, but you can be a patriot at any time in history and in any location. So it's about doing the right thing and that loyalty.
Yeah. And Adam, I do actually have a list of a lot of what Paul has been involved in. So I would actually love to go through some of this. I think
But he's a lord first, right? You're a lord.
Yes, Lord first.
Lord Hutchinson on the podcast.
Knight second. Like I think it's worth going into some of those, because I mean it is a. I think it's important, you know, when you've got someone who has created a lot of value in the world, for people to like actually really contextually understand who we're actually on with today, and the body of work that obviously has taken a lot of other people, that, you know, that goes well beyond just you, Paul, but like you've clearly been at the center of a lot of this, and you know, everything from serial entrepreneur of over 15 successful companies.
Hold on. I've got to make sure that everybody knows that he is a Utah Ute and I'm a Utah Ute, so I also am a
Let's go. Let's go.
Utes.
I am outnumbered on the call today.
That's a first. Texas.
It is.
Longhorns suck.
And I mentioned earlier with Adam, someday I'm going to get a business card that says Paul Hutchinson DMA. I've actually told him to make me one. DMA doesn't mean anything. All this, these titles are all crap, you know.
Absolutely,
they really are. I've really seen in all the years in undercover work. I led 70 undercover rescue missions, and the common thread with all of these guys who are involved in these hideous crimes is arrogance and pride. And so any time that I'm, you know, if somebody's saying, oh, look at me, you know, so yeah, there's a lot of beautiful accolades from, you know, the Ellis Island Medal of Honor and the International Medal of Freedom and those. Yep. But the truth is none of them mean anything. It's all that my heart is the only real value that I can bring to the world. And so,
yeah.
I think more than anything else, it's a reflection of what you just said. I think it's what's at the heart of you and what you're out there doing in the world and what you are trying to invite other people to participate in. And I mean, the body of work speaks to that. I mean, having been in the entrepreneurial space for 20 years now, like there's no way that you could have accomplished this much and been a part of as many, whether you want to say it's businesses or projects or efforts, or movements even, you couldn't have done that without being a person who is very aware of your strengths and weaknesses and the need for having other people involved to accomplish these things like this. I mean, and just to go through a few, I mean, we've mentioned a couple already, but founder of Child Liberation Foundation, founder of Liberating Humanity, executive producer in the movie The Sound of Freedom. We already mentioned that you've been knighted. That was both by the Knights Templar and the Order of by Prince Lorenzo and the Order of San Martino. Led and played a critical in over 70 undercover missions in 15 countries to identify and liberate children from sex trafficking. You mentioned the Ellis Island Medal of Honor. I mean, the list goes on and on. Everything from working with CIA and Navy SEAL and CROV experts, and trained by those folks. I mean, board member on a bunch of great foundations and groups: Make-A-Wish Foundation, Living Planet Aquarium, Hale Center Theater, FBI Citizens Academy. Man, I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, so let's. I would love to start at the beginning. Just where are you from, and like where did you grow up? Like where did life start for Paul?
Yeah, I grew up in Utah. Like Adam, I love the mountains. I learned how to snow ski when I was 6 years old, and as soon as snowboards became a thing, I figured out that as well, and thoroughly enjoyed the mountains there in the Rocky Mountains, and had a great family. Had 4 sisters, and I wanted to be a surgeon, not a regular doctor, but a surgeon. Not a regular surgeon, but a heart surgeon, and not just a regular heart surgeon. I wanted to specialize in children. I wanted to be a pediatric cardiologist, and so that's why I was going to the U. Is they had a great medical program there, and I got in a major car accident literally 2 months before taking the MCAT. And I severed all the tendons in my hand, and they didn't know if I'd have the dexterity to be a surgeon. So they said, you can be a regular doctor. And I answered, I said, I don't want to be a regular anything. Right. I got this life to live. Right? Yeah. I'm not gonna. If I'm going to be a garbage man, I'm going to own the dump. That's just how I think. And so, I changed my major to business and finance, and built a very successful number of companies in doing so.
What was it about pediatrics? Why was that the area of focus?
At the time, they made the most money, to be honest. I wanted to specialize. I told a mentor, he said, Paul, why do you want to be a doctor anyway? After I severed the tendons in my hand, I said, I'll be honest, I want the money. I'll go to school for 12 years so I can drive a Ferrari. That's just where I was. And but at the same time, my mother was working at Primary Children's Hospital and as a dietary technician there, and I felt a passion every time I went and saw those kids. Realizing, here's somebody completely outside of any decisions they made in their life are in a horrific situation. Now, not to judge somebody who's, has lung cancer because he smoked his whole life, but yeah, I'm kind of judging a little bit because that child dealing with cancer didn't do any. There was no bad choices in her life that brought her to that point. And so I felt a compassion for what I considered the truly innocent, and how I can help out in whatever way in that arena.
Okay, so all right, so you had the car accident, you damaged your hand, so that was no longer an option. So what happened? What happened from there?
My mentor was a friend of the family who was super successful, and he said, Paul, I'm going to give you some advice. If you follow it, you'll be a millionaire by the time you're 30, and you'll have the time to enjoy it. And a few of those pieces of advice. Number one, he said, the most valuable piece of real estate you'll ever own is the 6 inches between your ears. He said, you develop that first and everything else is yours. He said, I don't even want you to know if your car radio works. You should be listening to audio programs on business and finance and relationships and, all of these things that just continue to feed your mind with knowledge. In fact, years later, my kids, They joked, they said, Dad, the only reason you like 80s music is that's the last thing you ever heard, right? Because I was just immersing myself in this. In fact, years later, I bought I bought LeBron James's Range Rover, and this thing had
Okay.
$5,000 per rim on each rim. That had a subwoofers. He spent over like $60,000 just on the speakers, the subwoofers inside of my kids are like, Dad, what are you gonna do? Listening to your educational programs on your $60,000 subwoofer? I says, yeah, that's what allowed me to buy stuff like that, And so my mentor kind of really got me going on reading a book every month and listening to audio program every day. But the thing that changed everything for me, Nate, was he said, Paul, he said, the average person donates about 2% of their annual income to charity, to making a difference in the lives of others. He said, the book of Malachi, the last book in the Old Testament, says that if you simply give 10% that to charity, that the windows of heaven will open and there won't even be room enough to receive it. He said, Paul, he said, I don't even want you to go 10%. He said, I think you ought to look at something like 15 to 20% of your money and 20% of your time in making a difference in the lives of others. And that was difficult. I mean, I was earning $2,000 a month and giving up 20% of that, I have to live on $1,600. But I believe that one decision, you can call it karma, you can call it, universal law of exchange. I call it gifts from God. There is a very real power, infinite power, that is very interested in us doing good. And when doing so, massive, beautiful things happen in our life. How does somebody become a partner, let alone a founder of a multi-billion-dollar investment fund? You're not a University of Utah dropout, right? The statistical probability of me being where I am is 0. The only way that I can understand it is that I made that decision in my early 20s to give until it hurt, to find things I was passionate about and make a massive impact in the lives of other people in the world around me.
I think that's a truth that it's hard. It's hard to hear even for myself, because the parting of money is something that's a lot easier for people to get away with, because it's something that the exchange there, the transactional nature of it is so easier. Like, I made this, I can give it away. And maybe not so easy, but like the actual sacrifice of time, that's really difficult, because I think, in my own life, we've probably talked about this on the podcast before. I have a kind of a similar story. Granted, I wasted my 20s being a drug addict, so my kickoff point didn't start till my 30s, and I'm now 40. So I've gone on the same kind of track of like giving away money till it hurts, kind of trying to flip the paradigm. I don't need to go into specifics here, but that verse in Malachi where he says, like, test. That's the only part in the Bible where he actually asks to be tested. It's like, if you give the tithe, then you will see that the storehouses of heaven will be released to you. And so I was like, I'm going to bank my life on that particular verse, and many of the things that I've wanted to have transpire in my life have. I don't think I've ever made less in a year than I did the year prior, maybe one time, and it wasn't by that much. So it's just been up and to the right. The time, that's something that I think is really difficult. And I think there's a conversation around this too. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is called to do what you did in terms of time and money, but there is this underlying theme that if you choose to sacrifice what is most valuable to you, and for most people that is money, at the expense of your own pleasure, and then direct it towards some kind of philanthropic or altruistic mechanism, then you are going to not only be like the beneficiary of that because now you have less attachment to it, but you're going to be a conduit for the good that we want to see in the world, as Gandhi says. And that's what it says in Matthew, like, seek first the kingdom and its righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you. And so money's a really easy one. So I'm just like listening to this and now actually inspired to figure out how I can personally create more time to give away. And I think that, something that we're doing in our own business is that, like, I'm trying to get to a place where I can elevate so that I have more time. So how do I rise out of my business?
Understand this, Adam. The very nature of what you're doing right now is philanthropic, right? You are finding ways to earn an income with a following, with a podcast, in a way where you are bringing massive good and awareness to the world. It's okay to actually earn money while contributing greatly to the world around you. You know, the Liberating Humanity is a for-profit. The Child Liberation Foundation is nonprofit because those kids can't pay. But, you know, if I'm going to bring adults in to fix their shit, I'm going to charge them for doing so. I'm going to give them $20,000 worth of value for $2,500 in cash coming in. But you can create value that far exceeds what you bring in. And so, you know, even back to the time of Abraham Lincoln, it wasn't guys like me. It wasn't the guys rescuing the slaves that created the biggest difference. It was people like you two. It was people like Harriet Beecher Stowe. She wrote a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. She was the podcast of the age, right? She was the media of the age. And in fact, years later, when Abraham Lincoln met her, he said, "Oh, so you're the little lady that wrote the book that started the big war," right?
Yeah.
So that's what this movement's about. You're doing so much good by changing public opinion and by helping people stay with their moral foundations and find a better way to live life and be philanthropic and help their kids, etc. So you're on that track every day.
Yeah,
So
I just
when-
hope people who listen to this realize that they too can do that, right? It starts small, like you said. It's 2%. So, like, how do you give 3%, 4%? Gradually giving more, just in the understanding that, like, this is a net positive for you and then the people who receive.
Exactly.
So when you made that decision, how did that, like, in what other ways did that, like, I guess, affect the way that you looked at the world and, like, the way you started just living? Like, what else was happening in your life, like, that was consistent with that decision, or were there any things like that?
Well, I didn't know where to give it away at first. You know, I literally went downtown with boxes of pizzas, and I had my kids in the back seat of our Lincoln Navigator at the time, and we rolled down our windows in the rough area of town, and had my kids handing out. You know, they opened the boxes and they were handing out one piece at a time to all the homeless. And man, these homeless came over and started grabbing boxes and yelling and throwing F-bombs, and I'm like, what the crap? I roll up the windows, and you know that made an impact on me. I'm like, you know what? I'm down here feeding y'all, and you're treating my, throwing these F-bombs in front of my kids and this negative energy. And, over time I realized, okay, I'm not going to judge these guys for being homeless. Who knows, if I didn't come from a healthy family, that I couldn't have made bad choices and been in that position as well. But for me personally, I had to make the hard choice to only focus on what I considered the truly innocent. So, then I focused all of my philanthropic dollars and time on helping children. Now, today I've expanded that. I also sit on a board of directors for the Federal Enforcement Homeland Security Foundation that helps fallen federal officers, and I help pay for funerals. Anybody who puts their life in danger to protect mine is somebody that I put charitable money towards. But other than that, I served on a bunch of different boards of different charities, and I was on the Make-A-Wish board of directors for 7 years before I got involved in the anti-child trafficking work.
Got it. Yeah, there was a company that I helped start years ago, BioTrust Nutrition, that we were really involved with Make-A-Wish, and it was really neat to get to be a part of that. And you said you were on that board for about 7 years. 7 years.
In fact, I have on my mantle, I've got all of these awards, these lifetime achievement awards, all this crap, Harvard Race Award, and I have even the medal for racing the Baja 1000. But then my favorite, my most treasured of all of them, is a simple star that represents the children who we were able to help grant their wishes when they were having, they had life-threatening illnesses and whatnot, and it was super special. Even whether their wish was to drive in a Lamborghini or meet a movie star, it was just beautiful to help their wishes come true. And ironically, it actually helped them regain hope and kick the cancer, and a lot of them were able to recover in a really beautiful way.
No, that's
awesome.
And for the people, so obviously, you've had different seasons of the way that you've given your time. Like, for someone who, isn't looking to be like a board member or, like to have like that level of involvement, like what would be your advice to somebody that's just wanting to go out there and give their time?
We have a close friend. This guy, He's making like $1 million a week in his company, right? They're just killing it. And his wife, without fail, him and his wife every Thursday go down to the homeless shelter and help just dish the soup, physically being there. I mean, he can write checks all day long, and he does, but disciplining themselves to physically put that time in is, I believe, as valuable, if not more, than just writing the checks.
Sure.
And you don't have to be making $1 million a week. You can literally, with no money whatsoever, go donate the time at different places in need.
Absolutely. No, that makes sense. And again, money is one type of resource, but time is another very valuable one. And giving that, obviously, you can go out there and have impact. That makes a ton of sense.
I've heard time is money. No, but I think that you're right in saying that the face-to-face aspect of it, because ultimately we're relational animals or relational beings, and so it's one thing to go through a soup kitchen line and pick stuff up without having the actual interaction with a person, which sometimes happens, but being able to sit down and get to know somebody, get to hear their story, have them feel known and heard, it's actually probably more important, because it gives them value, or it reestablishes the fact that they're worth what they say that they're not. I did a homeless ministry with my wife for several years until we had our kids, and we would do that every Monday night. Just go down to a homeless shelter and talk to people for like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And, for us, it became difficult only because you felt like you heard the same story over and over again. But for them, it was a light. I mean, we knew that they enjoyed us being down there because they felt seen and they felt heard by members of society who normally wouldn't enter into their sphere.
Absolutely. And it keeps guys like us who, we have these infinite blessings. It keeps us humble and keeps things in perspective as well. So many times we live in this bubble and we don't understand some of the hardships that are really out there. And so serving in that way helps bring us closer to God and closer to humanity. If you love me, feed my sheep. And what does that look like? Is that just writing a check? Is feeding the sheep just, pushing money over? No, I believe that it's a physical action.
Yeah. So kind of shifting gears here, knowing that the Sound of Freedom had such an impact on the American culture at large, and knowing that it did not go through the traditional Hollywood system, but it's still making a movie, I'm just curious, how difficult was it to make that movie and then bring it to theaters compared to what you would normally do inside of your philanthropic efforts?
Well, first of all, I'm not a movie maker, so
yeah.
I was the first money in on. I was the primary investor in Sound of Freedom, and it was because we knew, myself and the Jim Caviezel's character and the other Navy SEALs and Green Berets that were with us on these ops, we knew that we needed millions of people to create a movement to really fix this. And we couldn't take millions of people to see what we had seen, but we could help millions of people feel what we had felt. And so when myself and Andy and a couple others put I put the first money, and some of these other operators were the first three investors in the movie were all former operators who had done the work and seen the travesty firsthand, and all of us said, you know what, I don't care if I don't make this money back. That's not what this is about. This is about creating something that will truly create a global movement, and it needed to be done right. We went into Sony and Lionsgate and Paramount, and they were interested in the storyline, but they wanted complete control. They wanted the ability to change the storyline however they saw fit. I mean, they could have put me and Tim in a gay sex scene in the middle of the film, and we couldn't do anything about it. They could have had one of our operators, touching a child, whatever. They could have twisted the plot. And there was liberty put into the script, but everything there happened, or we had learned that from the different traffickers, and we needed the world to see that and feel it in order for us to really create a movement. And so we decided we would take this to the people, by the people. We would fund it privately. We wouldn't go after big Hollywood funding. And we found some great families that stepped in and were a part of that. But even after we were completely done, It was 5 years before it came out that we were completely done, and we got just blocked everywhere from all of traditional distribution. And you know, people can throw out conspiracies and oh this, that, whatever. Let me tell you really what's going on.
Please.
We are being fed a narrative that is there is an agenda within big media and Hollywood that is slowly taking us away from our core values. In fact, Angel Studios, the studio that brought Sound of Freedom out finally independently, you look at the history of Angel Studios. Even before they brought the shows and et cetera, years and years ago, they got sued by Hollywood. Why? Their predecessor did. The reason they got sued is because they had a piece of hardware, like a DVD player, right, that had some software in it that allowed good conservative parents to take a movie that maybe was rated R, and we wanted to watch it with our kids, but we wanted to remove the sex, we wanted to remove the vulgarity, we wanted to remove the blasphemy, we wanted to remove the killing, whatever it was. We could actually change the settings and take thousands and thousands of movies and be able to watch them PG or even G with our kids, you know, which was a wonderful invention. It was a great idea.
Yeah.
But Hollywood, because Angel Studios was giving you, as a good parent, the ability to filter what was coming into your home, then they got sued over it? Are you kidding me, right? So things like that help us really see the enemy that we're against. And we need to be very aware of what's coming into our homes and what's being filtered and what is not allowed to be filtered.
That is kind of crazy because, like, if that, you know, back in the 80s, if you had a VCR, you could have done that manually yourself, like just recorded over onto another tape, which would have been violating copyright laws. But nonetheless, like, you could have done it yourself. Are they going to sue you just because you want to clean it up? And I think it does speak to the fact that this narrative, and this may touch on some of the conspiracy angles, but there is a forced narrative from what we would probably call this Luciferian not organization, but these Luciferian, I don't know
order.
what you would call them. Yeah,
It
the
is.
adherents of Lucifer.
This is a real fight. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess, like, I don't want to jump too far ahead here, but I personally, in watching the child trafficking movement over the past decade or so, have begun to understand that, like, what we're really going back to is an order of child sacrifice to advance this Luciferian agenda. Because, I mean, you go back to 3000 BC, and you've got the Canaanites and everything like that, and they're sacrificing babies to Moloch and to Baal and to all of these other gods, and you're like, oh, that's horrific, I can't believe we're doing that. But that same thing is happening through child trafficking and through also abortion. But I mean, that's a little
absolutely.
bit
Abortion is the blood of the children on our hands. Absolutely.
Yeah. So with the blocking and, you know, it having been produced 5 years before it was actually released, like, how often were you trying to get it into theaters? Like, was that just a 5-year battle, or did you just kind of shelve it?
It was. No, well, in the beginning, what had happened is Fox International did some work with us in Colombia on the filming, and they contributed a lot of resources as part of that, and a couple $1 million worth of value that we got from Fox International, and as part of that, they owned a piece of the production split, and they also had the distribution rights. Well, Fox International got bought out by Disney, and Disney, yeah, exactly. While we were editing and putting the final touches on the movie, and then Disney would not do distribution; they wouldn't touch it, but they had the rights to it. So, I mean, we literally had to come up with ways to untie that relationship, because they could have tabled it for the next 30 years and never done anything with it, and so we had to buy them out at a premium, and it took a whole year of negotiations on that. And then, even then, we had another former Disney executive that came in saying, "Oh, I don't know about those guys. Yeah, no, they were trying to screw you, but you know what? I can make this work for you." And he said he would bring $20 million in distribution in and tied it up for another, I think, at least 6 to 9 months, right? And then after that, we were already blacklisted on. I mean, we had people like Netflix. Are you kidding me? Netflix turns us down, yet they're the ones that are bringing Cuties. You know, I don't know if you've seen that. It's a TV series with a bunch of 10-year-olds dressed up like strippers. You know, we have to ask ourselves what is being filtered and what is not being filtered by big media and Hollywood in our homes.
And why? I mean, I think the big question is, and why?
What was there any other type of opposition that you faced, either professionally or personally, like when you started going down this path to reveal like this level of darkness?
Oh, there's always been that, for sure. A lot of our operators, these are former Green Berets, Navy SEALs. I mean, these are hardcore guys that have seen the darkest part of humanity on the battlefield. And after 1 or 2 undercover operations got burned out. It was just heavy. It was dark energy, and it was taking a toll on, you know, their family life and everything else. And it's dark. I don't know of anything that is more difficult to talk about, let alone see, than an 8-year-old being sold. There's just nothing worse, you know. And so yeah, there was some heavy energy there. And you know, I hold on to Ephesians 6. We are not battling this battle of flesh and bones. This is against principalities and darkness on the worst levels. And this is a battle. This is a spiritual battle that the only way we're going to win and eradicate child trafficking is we've got to turn people back to their moral compasses in their life. Otherwise, we're never going to win it fighting fire with fire. And so, yeah, we had pushback everywhere. We've had plenty of it. You know, it was in the beginning, I was asked to come in as this wealthy playboy. You know, in the Sound of Freedom movie, I was the one that the producer plays me. Eduardo Verástegui plays me. He's, you know, I didn't want to be known when we were filming. So he's Pablo Delgado, the billion-dollar fund manager who quits his job to go help rescue kids. In reality, they wanted me because I had the skill sets to deal with things if things got dangerous. But more importantly, I could act like a Jeffrey Epstein, right? Big, arrogant ego with lots of money and lots of lust, and you know, this energy that comes from people with unmitigated, arrogant egos. I was in that space. I mean, hell, I had a basketball court in my basement. I had 2 helicopters. I had, you know, 57 vehicles. I had to freaking get new license plates on each year. All this crap, right? And that
would be a pain. 57 license plates.
I know that includes my motorcycles, my ATVs, all that crap. But I never drove them all, right?
It's just so much DMV. Like, gosh.
Exactly. I had a full-time person just to deal with the DMV.
Just to deal with that.
You know, but yeah, but the energy played a toll on me and some of the other operators where it got difficult because we were facing that evil, and it changed our perspective on ourselves, on life as a whole, on what was really important and what wasn't. And unfortunately, some of the guys who we worked with in the very beginning ended up letting that negativity in that world of, you know, ego and arrogance and sex destroy their family lives as well. And it's sad to see, but it's happened to some of the best of them.
I would imagine that it's really tough to touch evil at that level and it not leave evidence of there being an interaction there. What else? And we've gone down this path in other discussions where when we look out at what's going on in the world, like Adam and I are very much like on the same page as you. Was like there's a spiritual war that's going on. Like there's no question. Like if there's how well coordinated things seem to appear. Like I just don't think people are intelligent enough to like actually coordinate on a mass level like we're watching happen right now, as far as just all of the different pieces that seem to be moving. But from your standpoint, like what else have you seen that's had you arrive like at that conclusion that like this is absolutely spiritual and like there's no question in your mind?
I'll tell you a story. This was beautiful. I was asked to help fund a big radio talk show host who wanted to go to Haiti. This was actually Glenn Beck. He's got a huge conservative following, and he wanted to film some of the children that we had that were in the orphanages and stuff there. So my son, I had left the Orthodox religion of my youth while he was gone on a 2-year mission, and he came back wondering if I was still a good guy, if I was still a good Christian, and I had divorced his mom at the time. And so, I brought him with me just to see what we were doing in that space, because I feel closer to my Creator now than I have ever felt my entire life. And we were there, and we were just filming around, and the very last day, the Homeland Security agent comes to me, and he said, Paul, I've had teams on the ground. They haven't found any traffickers, any connections. And you're the best I have. Can you go out with them? And so I told my son, hey, stay here in the hotel. I'm going to go out with the team tonight and connect with some of these guys to take down the head of the dragon here. Went out that night and connected with the top trafficking rings in all of Port-au-Prince, Haiti. In fact, ended up being the largest child rescue mission in one day in history in Haiti. It was like 34 children, but represented hundreds of others. It was massive over Super Bowl Sunday. But the setup was that night. And the next morning, I get back on the plane, and I'm sitting there. There's myself, there's the Homeland Security agent, there's my son and Glenn Beck, and Tim says to Glenn, he said, he just got briefed by some of the Navy SEALs. He said in 14 years in the CIA, Homeland Security, working with FBI agents, the best undercover operator I've ever seen is Paul Hutchinson. And Glenn turns to me and said, why is that? You've never had any government training. What is it that makes you different? And I said, I'll tell you exactly what happened last night. We were 2 a.m. downtown Port-au-Prince, hadn't found any connections. And I said, guys, can I take lead? And they said, yeah, we're good with that. Tim says, you're good. I want to see what you do. I said, okay, first things first, I need you to understand that I believe in God. I said, most people believe in a supreme being. Some people call God, the universe or Jehovah or Elohim or whatever it is. It doesn't matter. God exists and cares more about these children than you and I ever could, and knows exactly where they are. So if you're okay with it, even if you're not, I'm going to start out by asking for some help. So here we are, in downtown Port-au-Prince, the darkest, most voodoo-infested place on the Western Hemisphere, and we take off our hats and offer up a prayer. And then I said, guys, now I need you to understand how I see fear and faith. Most people think that faith is going to church and asking God to fix things in their life that they don't believe are going to be fixed. That's not faith. That's just hope. Faith is in James. I think it's James chapter 1 talks about ask in faith, nothing wavering. It's this unwavering conviction that what I want to have happen will happen. The problem is that most people have a problem with unwavering conviction about anything. Should I marry this woman? Should I start this new job? Should I move to this new city? I think that God looks down at things like that and says, you adults deal with that. But when it comes to these children, God's like, no way. If I've got good men and women willing to do something, I'm going to pave the way. And I've seen more miracles in this work than anything else in my life. And so with the fact that fear and faith cannot exist in the same person at the same time on the same subject, the reason behind it is in some ways they're the same power. People that believe bad things will happen to them actually attract that. And people who believe good things will happen actually attract that. And so it was easy for me to have unwavering conviction that we're going to find the kids. I'm writing a book right now called Are You Listening? With My Hand on My Heart. Not Are You Listening with My Hand on My Ear? Because that's not the listening that we need in life, in finding the kids, etc. In this spiritual battle, if we can learn how to shut off all of the noise and learn to listen from a place of the heart, then we can be guided in those situations exactly to where the children were being held. And in life, exactly the things that we need to do to direct our lives, our families' lives into a place of peace and happiness. So in that situation, I says, guys, I'm just going to be listening. And these guys are like, okay, dude, whatever. I said, just drive. They're just driving. I says, okay, stop right there. He said, the black alley, the motorcycle gang, yeah, right there. You need to stop. That guy knows something. I can feel it. And the Navy SEAL's like, oh, we need to survey the area. This is a dangerous area. I said, no, we don't have time for that. That guy's going to be gone. In fact, you guys are going to intimidate him. I need you to stay here. I'm going to go talk to him myself. And I get out, And I'm just me, you know. And I walk up and he pulls up his shirt, and there's a gun that was tucked in his shorts. And I'm just listening. And I pull out a $100 bill and I hand it to him. He goes, "What's that for?" He says, "That's for you. You keep it." I said, "I'll give you another one if you can help me with something. I've got a friend coming in over, you know, in a few weeks. He likes 10-year-olds. He's like, oh, I know somebody who can get him what he wants." I knew he did. I could feel it. We got our way to the very top trafficking rings in the entire country by just following some of those leads. And so, you know, it's every single one of these rescue missions. We weren't following logic and protocol. We were being led to places where the children were being held, and the things that we needed to do to keep our team safe. And you know, that the list goes on, but those were verifications that indeed this is a spiritual battle, and that we're on the right side. And I tell people, I don't care if you think that God is a cloud or a rainbow or a man or a woman or a universe or whatever. It doesn't matter. God is not okay with children being sold, and it was easy to tap into that power in that space.
And on that particular one where you guys were in, you said it was Port-au-Prince.
Mm-hmm.
How many children were you able to rescue on that mission?
That one ended up with 34 children. That was highlighted in a documentary called Operation Toussaint. If you watched it and saw me in there, you would hate my guts, because the only time you see me, my face is blurred and I'm with the traffickers. I was a deep cover for 10 years and my face was nowhere. We had the Homeland Security agent that would come in with the cameras and tell the stories of the groups. But I was deep cover for about 3.5 months there in Haiti to cut the head off the dragon. And some of those stories are highlighted in the Sound of Freedom book that's coming out in the next month. Goes into detail on some of those missions there in Haiti, as well as the ones that we did in Colombia.
So how have you been able to deal with the things that you have seen that, you know, some of these Navy SEALs, Green Berets have not been able to cope with? I mean, it has to be your faith. It has to be a peace that passes understanding that you're getting from Christ. I can't imagine any other thing.
100%. I went dressed as Halloween a few years ago. I went as an angel in devil's clothing, right? I had a full white outfit underneath with the bright, you know, LED lights and stuff, and even the angel wings. And then I put this black cloak over the top with this ugly thing, because that's really what we had to be undercover. Right, we had to appear as this devil type of a thing, but we had to hold on to the light within. If we didn't have a solid foundation, and you know, people ask me, they say, you know, "So Paul, are you Christian?" In the purest form of the word, purest form, meaning the original teachings that Yeshua taught of forgiveness and love and compassion. And my life has to be centered in that space. Otherwise, it's easy to be off the rails. I will say, and this is a longer conversation, but there are some tools that we came across about 7 years ago, some of my operators, that were some of the most effective tools we have ever found in helping people deal with PTSD, anxiety, depression, addictions, and in our case, especially in releasing some of that negativity that came with doing the undercover child rescue work.
I think we were talking about that right before the podcast started, right? We're talking about some of the plant-based therapies.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, you know, for your audience that's not aware on these things, you should read a book called The Immortality Key. And it actually touches on how the early Christian church used some of these different plant medicines to help open up and thin the veil, is how I like to see it. You know, we're born in this world. We don't remember. We've got this veil of forgiveness. We don't remember being with God. We don't remember being with Christ. We don't remember this. And so there are certain tools that can help to thin that veil and to feel in a really beautiful place. In fact, Johns Hopkins University, in one of their studies in using psilocybin, found that of over 800 participants who were self-proclaimed atheists, right? Self-proclaimed. They said there is not a God, not just agnostic, right? Not wondering. We're flat out atheists, self-proclaimed atheists, over 850 participants, 2/3 of them after one single guided meditation experience using psilocybin, 2/3 of those self-proclaimed atheists changed their proclamation and are now connected and believers in God, that's a powerful study, 2/3, right? Well, back in the 60s, President Nixon decided to throw a bunch of things under the bus and classify them as Schedule I drugs. I'm talking about things like sassafras and white lily and psilocybin. These are different types of psychedelics. And so because of that Schedule I drug classification, we've been taught our entire life that these things are as dangerous as cocaine. Right? Because if you have as much magic mushrooms in your purse as you do cocaine, you can go to jail for just as long, right? Because it's a Schedule I drug. The truth is, things like psilocybin are safer than table sugar. There's never been a case of addiction. There's never been a case of overdose. Now, I am not a fan whatsoever of somebody going to a rave party and going getting high on mushrooms, because if you're thinning that veil in an environment that has that kind of negativity, that you've got, the orgy going on over here, all this crap, then thinning that veil, there are unvirtuous intelligences in this universe just as there are virtuous ones. 1/3 of the hosts of heaven followed the adversary and are there. And so you've got to make sure that you set that sacred space. But if used with a trained facilitator, a guided meditation, transformational experience using things like this, we found that our operators who had, Navy SEALs and Green Berets who had done all of this battle and then done our undercover work with us, to be able to release all that negativity. We were able to bring people in who were raped as children and abused and all of this negativity and help them come to a place where those things are no longer plaguing them, getting them off of their anxiety and depression medication and helping them, break free from addictions. And so it's a powerful tool. We started working on changing a lot of the laws in Utah and in the United States. Utah, where I was from, we were this close to becoming the first state in the nation not only to decriminalize the use of these tools, but to fully legalize them in trauma therapy. My first successful company was the Attacking Anxiety and Depression Company. And when I was 29 years old, we had 200 employees. I had 50,000 people a month calling in off of an infomercial to help them overcome the negative habit patterns of thought creating anxiety and depression in the first place. We're now able to do that same work in 4 days that it took us 12 weeks before with the cognitive restructuring we were doing. So that's kind of a high-level overview, but we through Liberating Humanity, we host these healing retreats here in Latin America about every month and bring people in to help them release all of the toxicity in their life and come to a closer relationship with their Creator, with Christ. And so it's a beautiful experience.
I love that the emphasis that you place on it being a tool to bring you closer to the Creator, because I think that's where, and that's been my experience as well. Like I've gotten to participate in some of in a specific program that was more specifically for operators, but I got to watch a lot of the guys that I know that were going through it. Like that was one of the common threads that all of them came out of it. Like, and a lot of them didn't believe in God or a Creator prior to, and then they came out very much being like, okay, there's definitely a God. Like, and that's for me is probably one of the most. It was one of the things I was actually most nervous about going into it, because I had a fear because of what you talked about earlier. Like I grew up with, in a very conservative Christian household. My dad had a very specific take on, LSD and psychedelics, and like scared, me. Like it's probably one of the only things he actually effectively scared me out of doing, because of the way he told me a story around it. Like,
is your brain on
Dad.
drugs?
Yeah. Well, there was a lot of stuff that was the only one. Like I tried a lot of other things when I was younger, but that was the one that when my friends had those parties, I was like, no, my dad told me this one story. He was in the pharmaceutical industry, and he had this horror story of this woman that there was a study that they had done on that, like it was a bad trip of acid or something like that, and she literally never came off of it. Like, and I was like, so that was what was in the back of my mind.
And then there are things like that, you use acid and LSD. There's a big difference between the the crap that big pharma tries to put together to take the place of things that are truly natural. You know,
Right.
we only use absolutely pure, Mother Earth type tools but we use them in a way where we're setting that sacred space. We actually start our healing events with prayer, and because it's so important to invite that right energy and that right spirit into the healing experience. And I believe that that's one of the keys to eradicating child trafficking. You know, people are like, well, how does that fix? Well, here's the numbers behind it that will scare all of us. Literally 1 in every 4 women that you know, 1 in every 4 have been a victim of sexual violence as a child. About 1 in every 2 at some time in their life. Somewhere between 40 and 50% of all women have been a victim of sexual abuse or violence at some time in their life. But 1/4 of all women as a child. Now, for men, it's a little bit less. It's 1 out of every 5, about 20% of all men at some time in our life. But even then, those guys, 1/4 of them, it was under the age of 10 years old in their own homes. Now, here's what's happening. God bless them. 2/3 of all men who have dealt with that kind of pain, 2/3 grow up to be protectors. We never pass that on. We're going to ensure that pain is never passed on to any children. A lot of my operators, that's what they use that pain to motivate them to be this great protector and this rescuer of children. However, 1 out of every 3, if not given the healing tools that they need, become contact offenders, right? In the form of physical, verbal, or sexual abuse of a child. And it's not usually one child. It's upwards of 10, 20, upwards of 70 in some cases of a serial pedophile that will pass that trauma on. We've got this generational trauma. Somebody doesn't just grow up and say, oh, I'm going to go to Colombia and go rape a child. No, they were already abusing children in their own neighborhoods. If you walk out front of your house in any neighborhood in the United States, you walk out front, you look left and you look right down your street, there's a very high chance that one of those homes is a dangerous place for children. Okay? And so we need to take responsibility as adults of all of us and saying, okay, how do we eradicate child trafficking? I found myself every single undercover rescue mission that I was a part of. The thing that I wished the most is that I could have helped those children get free before they were ever traumatized in the first place. If we had a time machine and go back 5 years, 10 years, whatever it was, and looked at that perpetrator and said, what is going on in your life that makes you think it's okay in any way to go down that road? And give them the healing they need. Now, again, don't get me wrong. I can speak from a very unique platform. I have put my life in danger to ensure that they never hurt innocents again. But what I'm saying is that if we look at it from a compassionate standpoint, the way that Christ would look at it and say, okay, let's back up and let's focus on healing. What we don't have is a time machine. What we do have is hundreds of millions of men who have been traumatized as children. Some of them, it's going to just come out in low self-esteem and anger and depression and whatnot. Some of them, though, is going to come out in passing that trauma on. And so we need effective tools to help people heal. And if those effective tools means I have to take on big pharma and I have to help change the laws that have been in place for 50 years to allow good people to have the tools to break free from their own trauma so that they don't pass it on, if we do that, if we can help good Americans, good adults everywhere, get the tools they need to help their young adolescents and the young men in their life to shed that trauma, we will save millions of children. Millions of children. That's really the answer to the riddle, is we've got to help humanity heal. That's what liberating humanity is all about, not just rescuing the kids.
So for the people who are listening to this that would fall in that category, like where, you know, they're in that, whether they're in the 2/3 or the 1/3, but they have an awareness. And like, you know, and I would imagine whether you're in the 2/3 or the 1/3, like, not imagine, I know they're all going to benefit from this, or they have somebody in their life that they know has had that experience and is in need of this level of healing? Where's obviously the best place for them to start is like with God, but like if they know that they need, but like again, and I don't want to go into my own journey on like what had me go down that direction, but I know from experience like that thinning of the veil, because like I think we can either be damaged, something or someone can do something or happen to us that where we just don't have the ability to like heal. Like it's the damage can be that deep and that horrific. They need that assistance. They need the thinning of the veil. They need the guidance. Like where do they start like that journey and educating themselves and going down that path?
Absolutely. Well, you hit on it right smack on the head in the beginning. You have to turn to God, number one. Whether these were things that happened to you or things that you did, that you're ashamed of in your past, both are in the past and both can heal and both require the power of God to do so. But sometimes we're so stuck. I see guys who, they've had a pornography addiction for a long time, and that the second that you look at a woman as anything less than a divine feminine that she is, then you start going down a dark road. And the addiction that comes with things like pornography leads people to needing something harder to have that same fix. And sometimes harder is a little bit younger, a little bit, pretty soon they're fantasizing about things they wouldn't even thought was attractive 5 years ago. These are immediate dopamine hits to this addiction, or maybe even addiction to other substances and whatnot. All of these things, or your negative self-talk and your anxiety and depression, your PT, all of this stuff that you're holding on to, if you wanted to explore and learn more about some of what I believe are God-given tools allowing us to heal, first of all, I would read The Immortality Key. It's a wonderful book. There's another one called Change Your Mind that talks about how these plant medicines can be used effectively. But most importantly, seek out trained facilitators who really understand. This is I can't even tell you how important this is. Just getting some mushrooms and going into your dark bedroom and turning off the lights and looking, that is not, yes, you can work with that, but finding some people, and there's a lot of people that we've been training every single week with facilitators and sending them back out to the world so they know how to come from a place of the heart. They know how to set that sacred space. But most importantly, you have to identify where it is you want to go. If you're perfectly happy being stuck, you're going to stay stuck forever. But you get to the point where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. You want to release all of this crap. Come up with a clear intention of where you want to be. You can get some more information on some of the stuff that we're doing by just going to Liberating Humanity. But you can also look online, help change some. There's a lot of retreats here in Latin America. There's some in Costa Rica. There's some in Peru. We're working on, of course, changing the laws in the U.S. so that we can freely work with facilitators there and helping people break free. We're this close to having the VA approve a lot of these tools to helping return veterans overcome PTSD, which is super powerful as well.
Yeah, something that I wanted to mention. I actually just started the book The Sacred Plant by Terrence McKenna last night, of all things. Now, obviously, he doesn't come through with a Christian worldview on the origination of the relationship we have with plants and psychedelic use and all that, but the basic premise here is that if you are a Christian and you believe in the creation story the way that it's spelled out in the Bible, like these plants were created before humans were brought onto the earth. So all of the fundamental properties that they have were available at the time that Adam and Eve are walking around in the garden. So it wasn't lost on God that if you eat these cow patty mushrooms that something is going to happen to you, or if that you imbibe in this, that, or the other, like that you are going to experience something. There's, of course, caveats, right? Like marijuana, for instance. You can absolutely be addicted to some of these things. You can use them incorrectly and for
correct. Well, and marijuana is not a psychedelic, but right. and there is definitely addictive qualities there that we have to be aware of.
Yeah, I've never found myself having done mushrooms and then thinking the next day, I should do that again. Right now.
I know. I've got a business call. Let's do 3 grams.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, let's hear Hero Dose. But it's pretty cool because, you probably know who Sean Ryan is, and I've been listening to his story and how he actually came to faith through a psychedelic experience, and, an operator, having served a couple tours and having seen a lot of different crap, dealing with alcoholism for a long time, and then all of it just done with one trip. And I think that's it's really telling that God had a plan, and he had a design for these. I guess they're not technically plants, they're fungi, but we can go ahead and argue about classifications. It's just something that, it's not lost on God that these things are available to us. It's just one of those things where there is this conversation going on around them through Nixon, and probably predating that, where it's like, these are bad, but people don't give don't have full understanding and aren't thinking about it in the context of wow, God actually made these things for a reason.
All the while, the government was actually using them in the background for all sorts of other tests.
Exactly. They just took, and I believe, I'm kind of touching on something that Adam touched on. I believe that there's a Luciferian order who has had a very clear agenda for many, many years, generations, on controlling the minds of mankind. I mean, the eternal battle from before this world was one of freedom of choice versus full control. Satan's plan was for him to make us be good and make us do all these things, and he would take all the glory. But Christ's plan together with God, it was no, we're going to allow for the freedom of choice, and as part of that, the expansion and the creation of this beautiful, better version of ourselves. Well, unfortunately, when people are using things like psychedelics in the right way with trained facilitators, it breaks us free from a lot of these things that they are using to control us. And I've seen guys break free from their addictions to their social media and their addictions to alcohol and their hatred for each other. I mean, all of these divisions and everything else. You get into this beautiful space where you can literally feel the hearts of your children and your family and even your enemies. You can come to a place of compassion and break free from all that toxicity. And I believe that these tools, when used properly, can not only eradicate child trafficking, but can end wars and all the divisions and bring us back to a relationship with God.
Yeah, amen. I've got a question for you that kind of goes back to some of the child trafficking, what we were talking about earlier on that topic. With all of the evidence out there now, and the data, why is it that because it seems like there's disbelief that it's actually not happening or as bad as it's being made out to be, or people just it's so dark that they don't want to deal with it, or is it shades of both? But that's when it just baffles me that this is happening at the level that it is, and it just keeps it'll you see attention being brought to it, and then it quickly fades away. Well,
you're right, Nate. It's a dark subject. 2 years ago, before Sound of Freedom came out, it was difficult to have a conversation over dinner about child trafficking. That just wasn't proper,
Right.
And the good thing one of the great things the movie did was allow to have these conversations, because if we don't have them, we can't fix it. And now parents are asking, okay, what really is trafficking? I think this is an important thing to point out as well. Yes, things happen like what you saw on the film. Yes, there are, healthy families that have a child that is taken, that is put on a container and moved to. Those things do happen, but it is very, very, very small percentage compared to what real trafficking looks like. People ask, okay, what can I do? I want to do something. They come out of Sound of Freedom. They want to go to Colombia and go rescue children. Well, no, you're going to get shot, right? And you're probably going to get arrested if you go try to rescue kids in Colombia. The best thing you can do is go home and hug your children. And parents say, well, how's that going to fix trafficking? Well, the majority of children that get moved around and taken to another area, the majority of those children come from broken homes, from runaways or a broken foster care program. So by ensuring you have a healthy nucleus in your family, that alone will go a long way in making sure that a child isn't taken. Now, there are some other things that we can do, and I outline this in the Sound of Freedom book, where I go through a lot of things that parents can do to be aware of things they can do to keep their kids safe, situational awareness things, etc., helping make sure that they're not all over their social media and telling everybody where they are all the time. Those are all things that we can do to keep our kids safe. But the best thing that you can do is to have a relationship with your children where they can very comfortably come to you and say, hey, Dad, hey, Mom, I don't like it when you tell me to hug Uncle Harry because he touches me weird and he tells me that we should have secrets that are away from you. Or I don't like going to this friend's house because her brother is taking pictures of us when we're changing and he says sexual things to us. Or I don't like this babysitter because she's showing us pornography and tells us that we should trust her more than you. These are all grooming behaviors. And the majority of children who are abused, even the majority of children who are sold and made money out of sex in some way, the majority of them sleep in their own beds at night, right? Wow. And this should surprise a lot of parents. They're like, oh, wow, I thought it was just the ones that are kidnapped. No. And here's what happens. We're here in South America right now. We're working every day in helping with these safe houses of these children that don't have families and getting them healed. The benefit here is that we know these children were abused, and we can immediately start giving them the help and the love and the healing that they need. In our homes in the U.S., the average age of somebody coming out and saying I was abused as a child, the average age is 52 years old. That's my age. I've raised my kids. I've built my career. If somebody is holding on to that trauma for decades, then it does require something like psychedelics to open up that wound and dig out all that crap that's been rotting for decades. And so helping children immediately upon having something bad happen can help them grow up to be good adults and healthy adults. But if we don't pay attention to those signs, if we don't get them out of that dangerous, 92% of sexual abuse happens in a familial member, somebody that the family knows, part of the family, or somebody in the neighborhood. And so this is bigger. Trafficking, yeah, there's 10 million children that are being trafficked, that are being sold, and a lot of them sleep in their own beds. But there are literally billions of men and women who have dealt with sexual trauma as a child in their own homes. And this is leading to the same kind of damage that the child is that's being sold.
Yeah, just to kind of put a comedic angle on that, there's this trending video where this OnlyFans girl is talking about what she does, and then it cuts to this other girl, and she's sitting there, she's like, yeah, like, I could see myself having done that, but, what was it that my dad used to tell me every day that stopped me? I love you. And it's like you just laugh because you're like, oh yeah, like if you love your children, if you go and hug them and you create that kind of intimacy where they feel comfortable. I have a almost 7-year-old and an almost 3-year-old, and those are the kinds of things that, like, not only having watched the movie, but that just reinforced them. Like, they have to know how much that I love them, so that they feel safe enough to tell me when something is going wrong somewhere else in their life. And hope to God they never experience anything like that, but I wouldn't know if they didn't have a relationship with me where they felt protected and they felt like they could confide in me. And that is one of those things where I think parents, by and large, are like, if they're neglecting to do that, they are kind of pushing their children into those activities, or they're endangering them. And so passivity.
And this is another reason your child's relationship with God is one of the most powerful foundations you can give them. That healthy self-esteem and them knowing that they are somebody, that they have divinity within them, that alone will go a long way in making sure that they have the ability to say, no, don't touch me like that. And I don't, it's the ones that these predators will identify are ones that have got low self-esteem, that don't know who they are, that don't walk with their head up, that are being already verbally abused at home, so they're already down, and now of course they're more susceptible to be a victim. So giving your kids high self-esteem and a healthy relationship with God are the two most effective tools, blessings that you can give them to keep them safe in a dangerous world.
No, it starts at home. And
Yeah.
that makes complete sense. That and it also connects a dot as to why the family is just relentlessly under attack.
Yeah.
100%. And that's what we have to be really aware of is what things are pulling apart the family, what things are taking us away from our moral foundations, what things are taking us away from God, because those are the things that are going to destroy humanity. And we need to be very, very aware of that to keep our kids safe. And, and I'm very hopeful. I'm not a downer. I've seen the darkest part of humanity. There's nothing darker than what me and my operators have seen in undercover work and finding these kids. But I am extremely hopeful of where we are going as humanity and breaking free from this toxicity and this negativity. And I believe in one generation, we can heal humanity. All we have to do is break that generational trauma chain by giving people the ability to heal before they pass that trauma on.
Yeah. That makes sense. I mean, and what's crazy is the things that we have needed have been here all along. There's no company needing to synthesize anything or make anything that's like in a laboratory. It's readily available. Well, Paul, is there anything that's on your radar now that like also in this same vein of like and I love the balance of what we're talking about here too. I love the fact that we're covering something that's extremely important as far as like just the mass trauma that is being created out there. And then we also are talking about healing. Is there anything else on those two spectrums that is on your radar that maybe isn't mainstream yet, that isn't being talked about, that should be getting talked about or people should be paying attention to?
Well, I'm grateful that things like mental health is not the taboo subject that it was 15, 20 years ago. We're starting to recognize, especially for us as men, when you bury the insecurities, when you bury those feelings and they come out in a toxic way, it's okay to cry. It's okay to let that stuff out. I have one of my close friends and operators who when he was 8 years old, had a situation where his uncle had abused him, and it came out in him. He was a protector of children in every way, but it also affected him in his healthy relationships of his life, where he was constantly trying to prove to himself and the world that he was heterosexual because of that thing that happened when he was 8. Or guys will be like, oh, I don't want to talk about that because it makes me less of a man if I talk about that thing. No, it won't. You were 8. You were 8 years old, and a horrible thing happened because somebody was passing that trauma on to that little boy. And it's important to understand that every single cell in your body is brand new over the last few years. You don't even have the same body that was abused a number of years ago, but emotionally we're holding on to that trauma. And helping people understand that it's okay to be vulnerable, it's okay to be authentic, it's okay to show love, it's okay to lead from a place of the heart. And it's also important to understand that there's so much toxicity that's coming from division. And we can see it. We can see it in mainstream media. We can see it in our politics. If we are divided, we are easier to conquer. Guys, none of this stuff should be a right-wing or a left-wing issue. It shouldn't be a white or a black issue. It shouldn't be a rich or a poor issue. These are kids.
Yeah.
This is the hope of humanity, and this is something we can all come together on. People ask me, what was it like when you were finding these traffickers? What did you look for? What was and at first I thought the traffickers all had tattoos on their faces and earrings in their noses. The first trafficker I met was a businessman, clean cut. in a polo shirt. The second one I met was a beautiful woman who was running a modeling agency. And at first I thought, they're not traffickers, but then I realized over the years that the common thread was arrogance, greed, and lust. And I had to take a look in the mirror myself and ask myself how arrogance, greed, and lust was affecting me and my relationships. And on an arrogance standpoint, any time, and I touched on this on pornography earlier, any time that we're looking at another human being as anything less than the divine masculine, the divine feminine within them, that child of God that they are, if you're looking at them as an object in any way, you're playing in that same energy as the traffickers. We need to unite. We need to look at each other as one. We need to realize that even the divisions you see in the Middle East right now, I mean, those things go back all the way to the time of Abraham, where two different groups believe that they got the blessings of God, the birthrights of God, right? And so they're literally killing each other over this, who should get this blessings of God and who should have the birthright, all the way back to Abraham. It's sad to see. The reality is, the second that we start looking at each other as children of God, we can start healing through that division, and then those powers don't have that power over us. So those are things important. Another thing that nobody is talking about that I'm just going to touch on really briefly is the fact that I believe we really need to get back to Mother Earth. We need to be, we're in a very precarious position in the United States, wherein every major city, less than 10% of the food that is consumed is grown within a 100-mile radius of that city. And if something happens, our enemy, just the other day, Hezbollah ended up getting an EMP weapon that they could use against Israel. If an EMP hits the U.S., if something happens, even if the hackers come in and take down our electric grid, then we're going to be fighting over scarce resources. And we, as good Americans, need to come together and in that situation not destroy each other, because that's what they want us to do. And so being very, very aware at the precarious position that we're in the just-in-time delivery of food and all of the critical infrastructures being relying upon the grid, there's a lot we need to be paying attention to right there as well, as we're moving into this great war in good against evil, which I think is just right at the pinnacle right now. I believe that in our lifetime we're going to see the millennial reign. I believe we're going to see that 1,000 years of peace, but we're not going to get there without going through some tribulation. And how we survive that tribulation is having our hearts in the right place and a connection with God.
Do you have any thoughts around that? And this is something that I've thought about. And speaking of you having gone to the University of Utah, I remember about 15, 16 years ago, the University of Utah was talking about some of the advents they made in nanotechnology. And they're like, hey, within like 20 years, you're going to be able to inject a nanocomputer into your brainstem. We're going to be able to seed it into your cerebellum, and then we're going to be able to basically program your brain to fix yourself and to do these things and that things. And I was just like, okay, 15 years ago, I didn't really know what to make of that. It did kind of scare me as a Christian. I was like, well, that kind of eliminates free will, so I don't know how we're going to be people any longer. And so now with AI being what it is, and the transhumanism movement really being pushed very thoroughly by the tech giants and the people who are leading right there, do you think that kind of thing happening and like that being on the horizon may, I wouldn't say force God's hand, but he's like, yep, this is when I planned on to intervening anyways. So
for sure, these things have all been prophesied for thousands of years. The mark in the forehead and then the one on the hand, and that's all tied to this global control agenda that they have, and we need to be very aware of that. And there's people that are like Klaus Schwab's right-hand man that talks about how we need to, give up our relationship with the God above the clouds that doesn't exist, but, put your trust in the God of the real cloud, the computer systems and whatnot. And sadly, some people are moving that direction. They're seeing AI as this great, God-like entity that can fix all the problems for us, and we can give up that control. And I believe that some of that is tied to what the Antichrist is all about, because we need to And again, in this next book that I'm writing called Are You Listening, I talk about how every single one of us, we're born with the ability to feel and recognize the spirit of truth. There's something that is innate within all of us, and I know that Nate has experienced that when you're in the plant medicine experience as well. You're clearing out your pineal gland. Literally everything in our body is a receiver and a transmitter. But we have way too much noise to be able to really tune in and listen. In our prayers even, so many times our prayers are one way. God, please fix this. Please fix this. I'm sorry for this. Please forgive me for this. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. But we don't even take time to listen. And so, in our retreats, we take a bunch of time in teaching people, not even with the medicine, this is completely outside of that, outside of the plants, is teaching people how to meditate, how to turn off their logical crap going on and to learn how to tune in. I believe that in doing so, there is an infinite wellspring of knowledge way beyond AI, way beyond all of this other crap that we were all born with. And teaching people how to tune into that is one of the weapons against AI and this movement to completely control humanity. So it's important to tune into that place of the heart, and that will direct you in all ways. Way better than AI.
Yeah, one other question that I had, I think we touched on this before we started recording, was it goes back to child trafficking, of course. How much of this, obviously there's a Luciferian agenda, but how much of this stuff is like tied into satanic ritual abuse, where there is an explicit like antichrist element to it? I mean, it can't be every child being trafficked is a part of that, but I would imagine the more nefarious, the more things that we talk about, like Pizzagate, the Illuminati, all of the things that, USA Today and CNN are going to tell you you're a crackpot for even talking about. I mean, it's got to be a part of it. I would
Absolutely.
imagine, especially at the upper echelon of power and like influence.
And most of us innately already know that things like the Jeffrey Epstein event was not something that he controlled himself. If you are an agency who wants to control the votes of a politician, of a federal judge, of a senator, of a congressman, if you want to control their votes forever, get that kind of blackmail on them. Get them on a jet to an island, have them taking some drugs, having them on film with a 12-year-old. You have their control. You control them forever, right? And unfortunately, that's the swamp that needs to be drained. Is that there is so much toxicity, there's so much blackmail that's going on, and bringing things like greed and money and sex and children as part of it is a big part of it, and that's where they're using to control a lot of these votes. In addition to that, yes, this spiritual battle is, I believe we're going to see it for what it is within the next few years. This isn't going to be a conspiracy thing where you and I are just sitting here, there's these dark rituals. No, it's happening all the way to the top. In fact, if you want a book that goes into depth as to how really what's going on there, get Pawns in the Game by William Carr. Pawns in the Game was written almost 100 years ago, and it goes into he'll drop a bomb. He'll say, okay, the Rothschild family made a covenant with the Luciferian order. Now let me prove it to you. In the next 2 chapters, he goes through documentation over and over again and talks about how our financial system is being controlled, and how the big pharma is being controlled, and how child sex trafficking and these sacrifices really are happening, and at the highest level of government, and even in different philanthropic organizations, and it's important to understand what's really out there, so that if we don't know what the enemy is, we can't fight the enemy. And too many times people are thinking, there's just a battle over, right and left and rich and poor and everything else. No, this is a battle that has been raging from before this world was, and it's all tied to the control of the mind and the control of the human race, and we need to be aware of it so that we can win this battle.
And are you able to like get eyes into that kind of those circles of it, so that, or I don't know if you, but like any organization could start to attack that and protect those children, or are they just so well insulated because of
there are
influence?
groups that are fighting those. I've interviewed a few of them. A lot of my undercover work were taking down trafficking rings throughout Latin America, and in Southeast Asia, and some in Europe, etc. The real darkness is coming in the higher echelons of Hollywood and in our politics, and so these are ones that there are survivors that are coming forth now that are breaking their silence, that it's important to support them and realize that, yes, indeed, they have been through some very horrific things in their childhood, and it's tied to some pretty dark things. And so I think that the Sound of Freedom is just cracking the door open and allowing for these conversations so that we could step forward and say, you know what, no, we're not allowing this crap to happen to our kids. In fact, the children that are coming across the U.S. border, the border situation should have never been a right-wing, left-wing issue. It's a human trafficking issue, in particular a child trafficking issue. I'm here in South America right now, and every single day here in South America, every single day, children are disappearing from healthy homes. Now they're poor homes, but they're healthy homes. They've got a mom and a dad, and these parents don't have the resources to find out where the kids are going to. Yet we have over 100,000 children, undocumented children, coming across the border every single year with unaccompanied minors, and they are being put into new homes. If you really look at what immigration looks like, even people who are leaving war-torn areas and whatnot, you see a mom, a dad, and some children. When you look at pictures of people who are coming across the border, you've got hundreds of thousands of children, and you've got military-aged males from some of our enemy countries. This is an invasion that we're just paying for with our taxpayer dollars. And this is the first time in history that our taxpayer dollars are being used to transport trafficked children. Now, hopefully a lot of these families are healthy ones. But the State Department just admitted that they have lost 85,000 children. Lost them. There's no records of where they are. They're verified. Yeah. And even if, so this child is coming across, and just like you saw in The Sound of Freedom, where we had this little boy that the perpetrator was saying, you don't want something to happen to your sister, do you? You know, they control these children through fear and manipulation and drugs. And when they come across the border, they have a little phone number and an address of their new sponsor. Most of these sponsors have not been vetted properly with an FBI background check or anything else. And even if they have, what happens is then some of these children immediately disappear after being taken to their sponsor family. Where are these kids? Are they being used in some of these Luciferian order type situation? I don't know, but I do know that it gets dark, and we need to stand up as good people and fight this darkness with light. I believe that God's power can eradicate all of this darkness. But enough of us have to come together in a place of the heart and do it for the kids.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if there was, again, just more validation on the fact that this is like a true spiritual level battle between good and evil, like the fact that people can't come together on this topic just speaks to the fact that there's just something else that's at play that's preventing people from being able to see the truth. Because I mean, I whenever this topic comes up, I just can't even understand how people can't come off of the fences and like, okay, like we can't agree on this other stuff, but like, let's go save some kids. Like we can get behind that.
Yeah.
I'll say one thing. I mean, you've got a strong minority of the country who doesn't even care if they exit the womb alive. So they're not going to give a crap if they're being trafficked. That's unfortunate, but that's part of the problem here, and they've served children up to the god of the age, which is Satan.
Self.
Self and Satan. I mean, it should be on the news every single day. Like they should be like, 10,000 kids rescued today, but they don't give a crap. I mean, and you saw what happened in the Olympic ceremony. I mean, everything is organized around this not only ending, like, I should say not everything, but like popular culture and the powers that are in play right here have done this. Like, they're like, let's just keep making this happen because it furthers their agenda. And that is, of course, like the destruction of humanity, essentially. God hates humans, or excuse me, the devil hates humans. And so he's doing everything that he possibly can to destroy something that God loves. So,
yeah. But I think the good thing is we all know how this ends.
yeah,
You know,
we win.
and that it's going to be beautiful. And I think that there's enough good people to turn the tide. We just can't sit back quietly. You know, I remember on my very first phone call that I got from the Homeland Security agent saying, can you be in Colombia in 2 days? And I immediately answered yes. And my business partner called me like an hour later, and he said, Paul, he said, have you thought this through? He said, this is really dangerous. He said, you're set. You could, you worked really hard to build a successful company. He said, a few more years you could sell out and buy an island and be happy the rest of your life. And I said, John, would I really be happy if I bought an island, if I bought another plane, I said, and if I was doing something else dangerous, if I was climbing Everest tomorrow, you and I would have the same conversation. He goes, yeah, we probably would. I said, when I'm 95 years old and I look back on my life and I say I climbed this mountain and I helped build this multi-billion-dollar company and I helped rescue this many children from hell, which of them matters at all? You know, we need to set our priorities. We need to stand up for the children. We need to stand up for what is right. We need to bring our families closer to God. We need to have these discussions, and we need to drain the swamp. That has to happen, and I believe that there is enough good people. We just have to stand up and not just sit idly and allow something to happen.
And it starts at home.
Absolutely.
Well, it starts with yourself, right? Starts with yourself first, then at home.
I love the story of the man who was, he was busy reading his newspaper, and his little boy wanted to play, and he says, look, I'll play with you if you tell you what. And he found there was a map of the world on one of the newspapers. He tore it all up, this globe of the world. He says, on a little piece of paper, and he threw it down. He says, put all of the countries together, all the world together. You tape that all together, and then I'll go outside and play with you. Well, the little boy realized that on the other side wasn't, all the countries. It was actually a face of a man. So he just taped it all together, the face of the man, and then turned it over. And he says, well, wow, how did you do that? He says, well, I just put the man together, and the world all made sense. And that's really what, we have to do. We look at the man in the mirror. We fix that, and the world will come together. But we have to start with the man in the mirror.
I don't think that there's a better chance or opportunity for us to end this. We're almost up on time, but that was perfect. And I actually have to go play with my kids here in a little bit.
That's awesome.
So clearly there is a lot that you're doing. There's a lot that you've already done. But if anybody wants to go to the most important website in your opinion, or your social, like, how best can people follow you and also impact the ministry that you're working in right now?
Yeah, well, there's the easiest one to remember is just soundoffreedombook.com. You can go to soundoffreedombook.com. It'll link you right into Liberating Humanity website, and you can pre-order it there, or then you can surf around on the Liberating Humanity. You can get more information on help keeping your children safe. One of the situational awareness coaches that I had was the one who trains the CIA and the real Secret Service, and he amazing man. So you can get some information from him on there, free stuff, and some other paid things as well. If you want to be involved in the fight against child trafficking, you can go to liberatechildren.org, or just look up the Child Liberation Foundation. There's also links to the Child Liberation Foundation on our Liberating Humanity and the soundoffreedombook.com website. And again, there's so much information on that book that'll be out in about a month on everything from situational awareness to things you can do to keep your kids safe, to healing tools, breath work for the kids, and the details of some of the child rescue missions, and bringing you emotionally into that space, but filled with love and light in the rescue and rehabilitation and reuniting of these children with their families.
Excellent. That is awesome. Well,
And you can find me on all social medias, just Liberating Humanity. Just type in liberating.humanity on Instagram and Facebook. Instagram's been censoring the crap out of me. I mean, we hit 100,000 in 6 months out of zero because I was undercover, and then TikTok kept growing, and Instagram started filtering all of our crap. So we're trying to break free from that, but getting on some other platforms on YouTube and others, and getting all of this information out that parents can use to create a safer world for their kids.
I think that's awesome. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Nate. Thank you, Adam. Super grateful for both of you and allowing me to share here with your audience today.
Oh, thank you very much.